The white wedding dress dragged through the mud as Cordelia Fairweather stumbled away from the chapel, her veil torn and stained with tears. Behind her, the sound of her groom's voice echoed through the October air as he declared his love for another woman, her own sister. The entire congregation had watched in stunned silence as Jeremiah Whitmore had abandoned her at the altar, choosing instead the prettier, younger Magnolia who had been sitting in the front pew. Cordelia, wait. Her father's voice boomed across the small village of Dustwhistle, but she didn't turn back. She couldn't bear to see the pity in everyone's eyes, couldn't stomach another moment of the whispers that would follow her. For the rest of her days in this god-forsaken place, the autumn wind whipped her auburn hair across her face as she ran toward the edge of town, her satin slippers already ruined by the rough ground. She had nowhere to go, no money, no family willing to take her in after this humiliation, certainly no prospects for another marriage. At 24, she was already considered an old maid by most standards, and now she was a jilted one. At that, as she reached the outskirts of Dustwhistle, near the abandoned Sinclair homestead that had been empty since the Indian raids 2 summers prior, Cordelia collapsed against a weathered fence post. Her wedding dress spread around her like spilled cream. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing until her chest ached. That's when she heard the horse. The ground trembled beneath massive hooves, and Cordelia looked up through her tears too. See the largest man she had ever laid eyes upon approaching on a painted stallion? He sat tall in his saddle, his long black hair braided with feathers and beads, his bronze chest bare, except for intricate tattoos that told stories she couldn't read. A Comanche warrior, she realized with a start, her heart hammering against her ribs. The giant of a Manaslee, 6.5 feet tall, even seated, studied her with dark eyes that seemed to take in everything, her torn dress, her tear-stained face, her complete vulnerability. When he dismounted, his movements were fluid despite his imposing size, and Cordelia found herself unable to look away from the raw power that emanated from every inch of his frame. "You are far from your people, white woman," he said in English, his voice deep and resonant with only the faintest trace of an accent. His gaze swept over her wedding attire. "And it appears they have thrown you away like a broken pot." Cordelia wiped her nose with the back of her hand, trying to summon what little dignity she had left. "They haven't thrown me away. I chose to leave." The warrior's mouth quirked upward in what might have been amusement. "The tears on your face tell a different story." He stepped closer, and Cordelia caught the scent of sage and leather, wild freedom and untamed earth. "What is your name, abandoned bride?" "Leah," she whispered, then cleared her throat and spoke stronger. "Cordelia Fairweather. I am Kitanawa." "Of the Pennatica Comanche," he said, inclining his head slightly. "And I believe the spirits have brought you to me for a purpose?" "Purpose?" Cordelia struggled to her feet, her legs shaking beneath the weight of her elaborate dress. "I don't understand." Kitanawa circled her slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. But there was no menace in his gaze-only calculation, and something that might have been approval. "My wife died in the spring fever," he said simply. "My lodge is empty, my meals are cold, and my children need a mother's touch." The bluntness of his statement should have shocked her, but after the events of the day, Cordelia found herself oddly unaffected by his directness. "You're asking me to... to marry you? You don't even know me?" "I know you are strong enough to survive being cast out by your own people," Kitanawa replied, stopping directly in front of her. Up close, she could see the intricate scarification on his shoulders, the way his muscles moved beneath sun-darkened skin. "I know you have nowhere else to go, and I know that despite your tears, there is fire in your eyes that speaks of a warrior's spirit." Cordelia stared at him, her mind reeling. "I'm not a warrior. I'm a failed bride who can't even keep her own man faithful." "Your man was a fool," Kitanawa said with such conviction that Cordelia felt something inside her chest flutter. "A true warrior knows the value of loyalty. He would never abandon such treasure for something prettier, but worthless." The unexpected compliment, delivered with such matter-of-fact certainty, made Cordelia's cheeks burn. She looked away, but Kitanawa gently caught her chin and turned her face back to his. "You need a home," he said softly. "I need a woman. It is a practical arrangement. What makes you think I could live among your people? I know nothing of your ways." "You will learn," he said with quiet confidence. My sister, Ayana, will teach you what you need to know. My children, 2 sons and a daughter, are good children who have been without softness too long. His thumb brushed across her cheek, wiping away a remaining tear. And perhaps in time, we will find more than practicality between us. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through Cordelia's system. She had never felt such an immediate, physical response to Jeremiah's gentle courting touches. This man's presence seemed to awaken something primitive within her, something she hadn't even known existed. I don't have a choice, do I? She asked quietly. There is always a choice, Kitanawa replied. You can return to your village and face their pity and whispers for the rest of your days. You can try to make your way alone in the wilderness and likely die before the first snows. Or you can come with me and build a new life among people who will value your strength instead of mourning your perceived failures. Cordelia looked back toward Dustwhistle, where smoke from cooking fires was beginning to rise in the gathering dusk. Somewhere in that collection of wooden buildings, Jeremiah was probably already planning his wedding to Magnolia. Her father would be drinking away his shame, and the gossiping tongues would be working overtime to dissect every detail of her humiliation. Then she looked at Kitanawa, this powerful, mysterious man who had appeared like something from a fever dream just when she needed an escape most desperately. He was offering her a chance at a completely different life, dangerous, unknown, but undeniably real. If I come with you, she said slowly, what exactly would you expect from me? To be a mother to my children. To keep my lodge comfortable and my belly full. To stand beside me as my equal, not beneath me as my property. His dark eyes intensified. And to share my bed as my wife when you are ready. The last part made her heart race, but not with fear. With anticipation, the ride to Kitanawa's village took 3 days, during which Cordelia learned more about survival than she had in her entire 24 years of civilized living. Her wedding dress had been impractical for horseback travel, so Kitanawa had stopped at the first trading post they encountered and exchanged it for supplies and more suitable clothing: buckskin pants, a wool shirt, and sturdy boots. Your dress will make some trader's wife very happy, he had told her as they watched the merchant carefully fold the elaborate satin and lace. But it would have been destroyed within a day of hard travel. Cordelia had felt a pang watching her wedding gown disappear into the trader's wagon, but it was more relief than regret. That dress represented everything she was leaving behind: the suffocating expectations, the narrow definition of what a woman should be, the humiliation of not being enough for a man who had never truly seen her anyway. As they traveled deeper into Comanche territory, Kitanawa proved to be an unexpectedly considerate companion. He made sure she was warm at night, sharing his buffalo robe without making any advances. He taught her how to find water, how to read the signs of weather changes, how to move quietly through underbrush. Most surprisingly, he talked to Hurley. Sharing stories of his people, his children, his late wife. Sequoia was beautiful, he told her on the second night as they sat by their small fire. She laughed like water over stones and could track a deer for 3 days without losing the trail. But she was gentle, too gentle for the hard winters and the sickness that came with the white man's presence in our lands. You loved her very much, Cordelia said softly. Yes, Kitanawa replied without hesitation. But love was not enough to keep her alive. Sometimes practical strength is more valuable than tender feelings. Cordelia pondered this as she watched him tend the fire, his large hands moving with surprising delicacy. Is that what you think I am? Practical? Kitanawa looked at her across the flames, his expression serious. I think you are many things, Cordelia, Fairweather. Practical is only one of them. On the 3rd day, they crested a hill, and Cordelia saw her new home spread out in the valley below. Collection of hide tipis arranged in a careful circle. Smoke rising from cooking fires, children and dogs playing in the spaces between the dwellings. It looked nothing like Dustwhistle with its rigid rows of wooden houses and fenced yards. This place seemed to breathe with life, to move with the natural rhythm of the land itself. Are you afraid? Kitanawa asked, noticing her silence. Cordelia considered the question honestly. Terrified, she admitted. but also excited. I've never been anywhere that felt so alive. As they rode into the village, people emerged from their tipis to stare at the strange white woman there. War Chief had brought home. Cordelia saw curiosity in some faces, suspicion in others, but no one seemed hostile. Several women called out greetings to Kitanawa in their lyrical language, and children ran alongside their horses, chattering excitedly at the largest tipi in the center of the circle. Kitanawa dismounted and helped Cordelia down from her horse. She was still unsteady after 3 days of hard riding, and his hands lingered on her waist longer than strictly necessary, steadying her. "Ayana," he called, and a woman emerged from the tipi. Kitanawa's sister was stunning tall and graceful, with the same dark eyes and sharp cheekbones as her brother. She looked Cordelia up and down with frank assessment, then said something in Comanche that made Kitanawa laugh. "What did she say?" Cordelia asked. "She said you look like you've been dragged behind a horse for 3 days, but your eyes are not." Defeated Kitanawa grinned. "She also said I chose better than she expected." Before Cordelia could respond, 3 children came tumbling out of the tipi, 2 boys, who looked to be about 10 and 8, and a girl perhaps 6 years old. They all had their father's striking features and their late mother's graceful build. The eldest boy stepped forward and spoke to his father in their native tongue. Kitanawa placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and replied, then turned to Cordelia. "Honani wants to know if you will try to make us eat white man's food," he translated. "I told him you would learn to cook properly, but it might take time." The first weeks in Kitanawa's village tested every assumption Cordelia had ever held about her own capabilities. Under Ayana's patient but demanding tutelage, she learned to prepare buffalo hide, to weave grass into baskets, to identify which plants could heal and which could kill. Her hands, once soft and pale from a life of indoor domesticity, became calloused and strong. The children Anani, Dakota, and little Kimmela watched her with the frank curiosity of young creatures encountering something entirely new. They giggled when she mispronounced words in their language, helped her when she struggled with unfamiliar tasks, slowly began to accept her presence in their daily routines. Kimmela was the first to warm to her completely, perhaps because she had been so young when her mother died that she barely remembered having a woman's gentle attention. The little girl would climb into Cordelia's lap in the evenings, playing with her auburn hair and chattering in a mixture of Comanche and broken English. "She says your hair is like fire," Kitanawa translated one evening, as they sat around the central fire in their tipi. "Not the dangerous kind that burns everything, the kind that warms and lights the way." Cordelia felt tears prick her eyes. "She's such a sweet child. They all are." "They need you," Kitanawa said simply. "More than I realized when I first made my offer." Their marriage had been formalized in a simple ceremony the day after her arrival. It's more practical arrangement than romantic celebration, though the village had treated it as an occasion for feasting and dancing. Cordelia wore a beautiful dress of white doeskin that Ayana had given her, decorated with intricate beadwork and porcupine quills. Kitanawa had painted his face with traditional war paint and spoken vows in his own language that she didn't understand but felt in her bones. They had agreed to let their physical relationship develop naturally, and true to his word, Kitanawa made no demands on her. He slept on one side of their large tipi, while she took the other, with the children's sleeping areas between them. But Cordelia found herself increasingly aware of his presence, of the way he moved with quiet grace despite his size, of how he never raised his voice to the children, commanded their immediate respect with a single look. She was also discovering aspects of herself that her previous life had never allowed to emerge. When a hunting party returned with news that rival Kiowa warriors had been spotted near their territory, Cordelia surprised everyone, including herself, by asking if she could learn to shoot. "White women do not fight," Ayana said, frowning. "This white woman wants to protect her family," Cordelia replied firmly. Kitanawa, who had been cleaning his rifle nearby, looked up with interest. "You consider them your family now?" "Yes," Cordelia said without hesitation. "Yes. These children, this village they're mine to protect too." That afternoon, Kitanawa began teaching her to handle both rifle and bow. Her first attempts were disastrous, but she persisted with a determination that seemed to both amuse and impress her husband. "You have the instincts of a warrior," he told her, after she finally managed to hit the target he'd set up. "But the patience of a saint to endure so much frustration without cursing." "Oh, I've been cursing," Cordelia laughed, "just not in any language you understand." Their first real moment of intimacy came unexpectedly. Cordelia had been helping to prepare hides outside their tipi when a sudden thunderstorm broke over the village. She ran for shelter, but slipped in the mud, twisting her ankle and crying out in pain. Kitanawa appeared instantly, scooping her up in his powerful arms and carrying her inside. "It's just a twisted ankle," she protested as he set her gently on. "The sleeping furs? I'll be fine. Let me see," he said, his hand surprisingly gentle as he examined her injury. His touch sent warmth shooting up her leg and throughout her body, and when he looked up to meet her eyes, she saw that he felt it too, that spark of awareness that had been building between them for weeks. "Cordelia," he said softly, his hands still curved around her ankle. "Yes, I find myself thinking of you, not just as a practical arrangement." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "What do you think of me as?" Instead of answering with words, Kitanawa leaned forward and kissed her forehead, then her cheek. Then finally her lips softly at first, then with growing intensity when she kissed him back. It was nothing like the chaste pecks Jeremiah had given her during their courtship. This was fire and hunger and the promise of depths she had never imagined, when they finally broke apart. Both breathing hard, Kitanawa rested his forehead against hers. "I think," he said roughly, "that the spirits knew exactly what they were doing when they brought you to me." Winter came early and harsh that year, blanketing the village in snow that reached the tops of the tipi stakes. The brutal cold drove the tribe closer together, both literally and figuratively, as they shared resources and warmth to survive the frozen months. It was during one of the worst blizzards that Cordelia truly proved herself to her new family. A hunting party, including several of the village's best warriors, had been caught in the storm and hadn't returned when expected. While other families waited anxiously by their fires, Cordelia surprised everyone by suiting up in her warmest furs and announcing she was going to search for them. "You cannot," Ayana protested. "Storm will kill you before you find anything." "Then I'll die trying to bring my people home," Cordelia replied, checking her rifle and stuffing dried meat into her pack. "But I won't sit here doing nothing while they're lost out there." Kitanawa, who had been preparing his own search gear, stopped and stared at her. "Your people?" "Yes," she said firmly. "These are my people now, and I protect what's mine." What followed was a harrowing 12-hour journey through whipping snow and bitter wind. Cordelia and Kitanawa, along with 2 other experienced trackers, followed barely visible horse tracks across the frozen landscape. When they finally found the hunting party 5 men and 2 horses huddled in a natural cave formation. 3 of the warriors were suffering from severe frostbite and exposure. Cordelia worked tirelessly to help treat the injured, using skills Ayana had taught her about healing plants and wound care. Her calm efficiency in the crisis impressed even the village's eldest medicine woman, had initially been skeptical of the white woman's presence among them. "She has the heart of our people," the old woman declared when they finally made it back to the village. "The spirits have accepted her as one of us." The rescue earned Cordelia respect throughout the tribe, but more importantly, it seemed to be the final barrier that fell away between her and Kitanawa. That night, as they warmed themselves by their fire after the ordeal, he reached for her hand. "You could have died today," he said softly. "Why would you risk so much for people you barely know?" "It's because you care about them," Cordelia replied. "Simply, and I care about you." The admission hung in the air between them, more intimate than any physical touch could have been. Kitanawa's eyes searched her face in the firelight, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I did not expect this," he said. "When I offered you marriage, I thought only of practical needs. A mother for my children, a woman to tend. My lodge, I did not expect to feel what," she whispered. "Love," he said simply. "I did not expect to love you, Cordelia Fairweather." The confession broke something open inside her chest, all the walls she had built around her heart after Jeremiah's betrayal, all the careful distance she had maintained even as she grew fond of her new life. She realized she had been protecting herself from exactly this moment, when she would have to acknowledge that what had started as mutual necessity had become something infinitely more precious. "I love you too," she whispered, and then he was kissing her with desperate intensity, months of restrained desire finally given free rein when they made love that night for the first time. It was with a passion that surprised them both. Cordelia had never known her body could feel such things, could want with such fierce intensity. Jeremiah's fumbling courtship touches had never prepared her for the way Kitanawa worshipped her with hands and mouth, the way he made her feel beautiful and powerful and utterly desired afterward. As they lay entwined in the warm buffalo robes while the wind howled outside their tipi, Kitanawa traced patterns on her bare skin with gentle fingers. "You are marked by the spirits now," he murmured. Against her hair, "You belong to this land, to this people, to me. And you belong to me," she replied, surprising herself with the possessive note in her voice. Kitanawa chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest beneath her cheek. "Yes, my fierce woman, I am yours completely." As winter gradually gave way to spring, their bond only deepened. Cordelia threw herself into learning everything she could about Comanche traditions, language, and customs. She participated in the women's councils, contributed to important tribal decisions, and even began training some of the younger women in skills she had brought from her previous life: reading, writing, and basic medical knowledge from her fathers. Medical texts spring brought new challenges and unexpected dangers. Word arrived that the U.S. Army was establishing a fort just 2 days' ride from their village, bringing with it the inevitable conflicts between white settlement and native lands. Tensions ran high in the village as the elders debated whether to move deeper into the territory or attempt to negotiate with the military commanders. Cordelia found herself in a unique position, no longer fully white, but not born Comanche either. Both sides looked to her for insights into how the other might think and act, responsibility she took seriously despite the weight it placed on her shoulders. "The soldiers will see you as savages," she told the tribal council honestly during one heated discussion. "They won't understand that you have laws, traditions, families, just like they do. To them, you'll just be obstacles to be removed. And what do you see us as?" asked Mop, one of the more suspicious elders who had never fully accepted her presence. Cordelia met his challenging gaze steadily. "I see you as my family, my people, my home." The simple declaration seemed to settle something among the council members. Even Mop nodded grudgingly, acknowledging her commitment. It was Kitanawa who suggested the solution that would ultimately save the village. "Cordelia can speak to the soldiers," he said. "She understands their language, their ways. Perhaps she can make them see that we are not their enemies." The idea terrified Cordelia, but she knew it was their best chance for avoiding bloodshed. Accompanied by Kitanawa and 2 other warriors, she rode to the newly established Fort Morrison, wearing her finest Comanche dress and carrying herself with the dignity she had learned from watching Ayanna and the other respected women of the tribe. The meeting with Colonel Harrison was tense and difficult. The military commander was clearly uncomfortable dealing with a white woman who had gone native, as he put it, and several times implied that she must be there against her will. "Ma'am," he said stiffly, "if these savages are holding you captive, you need only say the word, and my men will ensure your safe return to civilization." "Colonel Harrison," Cordelia replied with icy politeness, "I am here of my own free will as a representative of my husband's people. We are not savages, and we are not your enemies. We simply want to live in peace on our own lands." The negotiations took 3 days, during which Cordelia served as translator and mediator between 2 cultures that seemed determined to misunderstand each other. Her fluency in both languages and customs proved invaluable, allowing her to explain concepts that had no direct translation and to find compromises that both sides could accept. In the end, they reached an agreement the village would be allowed to remain in their traditional territory in exchange for providing guides and scouts. For the Army's mapping expeditions, it wasn't a perfect solution, but it bought them time and avoided immediate conflict. On the ride back to the village, Kitanawa was unusually quiet. When Cordelia finally asked what was troubling him, he surprised her with his answer. "I was afraid. You would want to stay," he admitted. "When I saw you speaking with those soldiers, looking so comfortable in their world, I thought perhaps you would remember what you had given up to be with us." Cordelia reined in her horse and reached for his hand. "Kitanawa, look at me." When he met her eyes, she saw vulnerability there that he rarely allowed anyone to glimpse. "I gave up nothing of value," she said firmly. "I traded a life where I was, never truly seen for one where I am cherished. I exchanged people who made me feel small for a family that makes me feel strong. There is no comparison." That evening, the village celebrated their successful negotiations with a feast and dancing. That lasted until dawn. Cordelia found herself at the center of it all, accepting congratulations and expressions of gratitude from people who had once viewed her with suspicion. She had not only proven herself as one of them, she had become indispensable to their survival. As the fire burned low and families began drifting back to their tipis, Kitanawa pulled her close and whispered in her ear. "You have given me more than I ever dared dream," he said. "It's not just your love, but your fierce spirit, your clever mind, your brave heart. You are the missing piece that makes our family complete." Looking around at Hanani helping bank the fire, Dakota carrying sleeping Kimimela to their tipi, Ayana gathering up the dishes from the feast, Cordelia felt a deep sense of belonging that she had never experienced in all her years in Dust Whistle. This was home. This was family. This was where she was meant to be, 2 years after her dramatic arrival in the village. Cordelia stood outside her tipi watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. Her hand rested on her rounded belly, where their first child together grew strong and healthy. Kimimela, now 8 and completely devoted to her stepmother, had announced to anyone who would listen that the baby was going to be her special responsibility. "Another warrior for our family," Kitanawa said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her from behind, his large hands covering hers on her belly. "How do you know it will be a warrior?" Cordelia laughed, leaning back against his solid warmth. "Because it is part of you," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And you are the fiercest warrior I have ever known." Life had settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Konani, now 12, had begun training with the men, and looked up to Cordelia as much as his father, often asking her opinion on everything from hunting strategies to matters of the heart. Tokoda, at 10, had inherited his father's love of horses and his stepmother's quick wit, making him a favorite among the elders who enjoyed his clever observations. And Kimimela had bloomed under Cordelia's gentle guidance, becoming confident and curious about the world around her. The village itself had prospered under the peace agreement Cordelia had helped negotiate. Trade with the fort brought new opportunities, and several young warriors had found wives among the settlers who were drawn to the strength and honor of Comanche culture. The boundaries between worlds were becoming more fluid, more forgiving. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Mail rider from the fort carrying a letter addressed to Mrs. Cordelia Fairweather, care of the Penatika Comanche village. Cordelia's heart skipped as she recognized her father's handwriting on the envelope. The letter was brief, but shocking. Jeremiah Whitmore had died of consumption the previous winter, and Magnolia had married his business partner within months of his death. More surprisingly, Cordelia's father was writing to ask if she might consider returning to Dust Whistle to help care for her aging parents and run his medical practice. "He says the town needs a doctor," she told Kitanawa that evening as they sat by their fire, "and that people have begun to speak of me with respect rather than pity, especially after they heard about my work here." Kitanawa was quiet for a long time, staring into the flames. Finally, he looked up at her with serious eyes. "Do you want to go?" "No," Cordelia replied without hesitation. "But I think I need to visit them, to show them who I've become, and perhaps to bring some of what I've learned here to help people there." They decided to make the journey together as a family, traveling to Dust Whistle for an extended visit during which Cordelia could assist her father and introduce her Comanche family to her birth community. The reunion was awkward at first, her parents struggling to understand how their proper daughter had become this confident, capable woman, her former neighbors uncertain how to treat the imposing Comanche warrior who clearly adored his white wife. But Cordelia's medical skills, enhanced by years of learning native plant medicine from the tribe's healers, proved invaluable to the small town. She treated injuries and illnesses that the local doctor had been unable to help, earning grudging respect even from those who had once gossiped about her abandonment. Most satisfying of all was the moment when Magnolia Whitmore, Magnolia Haskins, and clearly unhappy in her marriage of convenience, approached Cordelia outside the general store. "I heard about your situation, Magnolia," said hesitantly. "I wanted to apologize for what happened at your wedding. It wasn't right, what Jeremiah and I did." Cordelia studied her younger sister, noting the shadows under her eyes and the way. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "Are you happy, Magnolia?" "I thought I would be," her sister admitted. "I thought having a husband, even Jeremiah, would make me feel important. But he never looked at me the way your husband looks at you." Looking across the street to where Kitanawa was helping Hanani select supplies for their return journey. Watching the gentle pride in his expression whenever his gaze fell on her, Cordelia felt a rush of gratitude for the path her life had taken. "Hope you find what you're looking for," she told Magnolia sincerely. "But I'm grateful now that my path led me somewhere else." After a month in Dust Whistle, they returned to the village, where Cordelia went into labor just 3 days after their arrival. Ayana served as midwife, guiding her through the birth with steady hands and encouraging words. When their son finally arrived, healthy, strong, and possessed of his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn Chinkitanawa, wept openly with joy. "What shall we call him?" Cordelia asked, exhausted but glowing with happiness.
"At,"
Kitanawa said softly. "It means falcon, because he will soar between two worlds as his mother has taught us all to do." As Cordelia held their son, while their older children gathered around to meet their new brother, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She had been abandoned at an altar, cast out from everything she had once known, only to find a love deeper and truer than anything she could have imagined. "Do you ever regret leaving your old life?" Kitanawa asked quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Cordelia looked around at their family at Hanani, practicing his English by reading Tutakota. At Kimimela, carefully braiding flowers into little chaitons. Soft hair, at Ayana, preparing the evening meal while humming an ancient lullaby. She thought of the life she would have had in Dust Whistle, married to a man who had never truly seen her, living small and safe and ultimately unfulfilled. "Never," she said with absolute certainty. "You gave me exactly what I needed, even when I didn't know what that was." "And what was that?" Cordelia smiled, kissing their son's forehead before leaning up to kiss her husband. "A chance to become who I was always meant to be." Outside their tipi, the sun set over the vast expanse of prairie that stretched endlessly toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of hope and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new opportunities to grow and love and build their life together. But tonight, Cordelia was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of a man who cherished her strength. Surrounded by children who called her mother, part of a community that valued her contributions, and blessed with a love that had transformed a moment of abandonment into a lifetime of belonging, the abandoned bride had found her home at last. And it was more beautiful than anything she had ever dared to dream.